I want to encourage you to take out the sermon notes inside your bulletin at this time. Today I will be continuing my sermon series entitled Made to Worship. And as I mentioned last Sunday, I have selected a theme passage for this series that I would like us to read together in unison each week. Psalm 57, verses 7 through 11 is our theme passage. And they should be up on the screen behind me in just a minute. Why don't you stand with me and let's read these verses together. My heart, O God, is steadfast. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. Awake, my soul. I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. You may be seated. Have you ever noticed how children are naturally gifted to see everything from a different perspective? They notice details and colors and textures and sounds that we often miss. Kids have an uncanny ability to find joy and amazement in the smallest discoveries. Their eyes light up. Big grins break out on their faces, and their mouths drop open as they are filled with wonder at new and exciting experiences. As parents and grandparents, we enjoy watching their fascination with the wonders around them, don't we? A grandmother recently shared how her two grandchildren, Anna and Luke, ages 5 and 3, popped in for an unexpected visit one afternoon. Anna and Luke liked to help themselves to the European chocolates that sat in a dish on the dining room table. When Anna reached for one of the chocolates, she discovered to her disappointment that the sun shining through the dining room window had melted them. Her grandmother suggested that they put the chocolates in the fridge for a little bit so that they would harden and be easier to eat. So they did that, and about an hour later, Anna checked in on the chocolates. And when she unwrapped the chocolate and put it in her mouth, she exclaimed to her grandmother, "You were right. Look how hard they are now. Wow, how did that happen?" And Anna's awe made her grandmother smile. You've probably had a similar experience with one of your own children or grandchildren. Maybe you have secretly watched one of them lying on their tummy in the lawn, captivated by the leaves strewn around them. Or maybe you caught a glimpse of another child or grandchild staring at a frog or insect with imaginative interest. A child's life is filled with wonder, and this sense of wonder enables them to see things in life that often escape the rest of us. Sadly, studies show that a child's creativity, which includes imagination and wonder, diminishes by 90% between ages 5 and 7. When adults get to be 40, they have about 2% of the creativity they had when they were 5 years old. Living with a sense of wonder and awe seldom happens in adulthood. We grow accustomed to daily rhythms. We show up to work at 8 a.m. until it's time to go home. And at night, we help the kids with their homework and watch a little bit of TV. We settle into mundane routines without ever thinking about wonder. G.K. Chesterton has said, "The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder." I agree with him. And I want to suggest this morning that in many respects, the American church today has lost its wonder. Yes, we've got the doctrine straight. Yes, we're faithful to our local church. And yes, we read our Bibles and pray occasionally. But we have lost our wonder of God. And this has negatively impacted our worship of God, because true worship always involves wonder. Wonder is the basis of our worship. And I believe that one of the main reasons why the American church has lost its wonder is because we have emphasized God's immanence to the neglect of God's transcendence. God's transcendence speaks to the fact that God exists separate from and superior to all creation. God's immanence, on the other hand, speaks to the fact that God is present and active within the world He created. A biblically balanced view of worship must take into account both God's transcendence and His immanence, His exaltation and His nearness, His majestic holiness and His immeasurable love. And as you can imagine, this balance is not always easy to maintain. Churches that focus exclusively on God's transcendence are in danger of making God appear distant, cold, unfriendly, unloving, and devoid of grace. However, churches that focus exclusively on God's immanence sometimes lose sight of His majesty and purity and His hatred of sin. We in modern Christianity have somehow missed this truth, the need for a biblically balanced view of worship. And we tend to overemphasize God's immanence. We have embraced the comfort of God's nearness at the expense of His transcendence. And while we should be thankful for the reality of God's grace, and we do want to enjoy His love, we have somehow neglected the truth of His majestic holiness. And that imbalance is eating at the heart of our worship. And so this morning, I want us to consider the wonder of God's holiness. Would you turn with me back to Isaiah chapter 6? Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah 6, verses 1 through 8, is universally recognized as the classic passage on God's holiness. And it's an important passage for us to study together this morning because it sets forth both the holiness of God and our only appropriate response to it. God's holiness is His divine perfection, that which makes Him unique and separated from anyone else and everything else. God is set apart. He is separate. He is holy. And Isaiah begins the chapter by informing us that King Uzziah had died. Uzziah had been king in Judah for 52 years. He was an effective king in the sense that he had secured the country from its enemies and presided over a time of peace and prosperity. He built a very formidable army, tightened up Judah's defenses, created economic productivity, and brought great external security. Nevertheless, inwardly, the nation was morally corrupt, defiled, and wretched. Their worship was notoriously superficial. And as a result, in chapter 5, Isaiah pronounced half a dozen curses on Judah. The people had the illusion that things were going very well for them because they had a good leader and they were materially prosperous. But in 740 BC, King Uzziah died of leprosy when God struck him down because of his pride. And when Uzziah died, the nation's sense of security was immediately gone. And it's in the midst of this moral and political confusion that God calls Isaiah to speak for him. And we're not sure exactly where Isaiah had this transcendent vision of God enthroned in heaven, but we do know that Isaiah's vision comprised 4 aspects. First of all, we learn that Isaiah saw the Lord's glory in verses 1 through 4. Rather unexpectedly, Isaiah saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Verse 1. This was a vision of God's glory. God was viewed seated on his throne, not standing, not pacing back and forth in the throne room, wringing his hand, worried about how everything was going to play out in the world. No, he was firmly seated on his throne. He was in control. He is in control. And everyone in the throne room knows it. And no matter what might happen to any of the thrones here on earth, the throne of heaven is secure. We also have this picture of the train of the Lord's robe filling the temple. That the train of God's robe is a symbol. It's symbolic language pointing to God's splendor, his beauty, his majesty that filled the temple. Interesting, and to be honest, I wasn't aware of this until studying for this message this week. In John, the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 21, the apostle indicates that Isaiah actually saw the pre-incarnate Christ in this vision, the second person of the Trinity. I always thought it was God the Father, but I realized it couldn't have been God the Father, as many people have thought, because John chapter 1, verse 18 says, "No one has ever seen God the Father, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." So Isaiah was allowed to see Christ before his earthly ministry, before his incarnation. And before Bethlehem, Isaiah was given one quick glimpse of Jesus in all of his glory, and it took his breath away. Next, we're told that Isaiah heard the voices of heavenly angels as they praised God. Look at verses 2 and 3. Above him, the Lord, were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." The Hebrew word seraph comes from a root word meaning to burn, probably suggesting that the seraphim are the guardians of the blazing glory, the blazing holiness of God. Did you notice they have 6 wings, the seraphim? Why 6 wings? Well, there were 2 to cover their faces, lest they see the glory of God and die. 2 wings covered their feet, which symbolized their lowliness, lest God see them and the shame that they felt in the presence of his infinite holiness. And with 2 more wings, they flew and used those wings to serve the Lord. And I found it interesting that 4 of the 6 wings are for relating to God, and only 2 were used to serve him. In Isaiah's vision, when the seraphim praised God, they did not say, eternal, eternal, eternal. They didn't say, faithful, 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 wise, 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 or mighty, mighty, mighty. They said, holy, holy, holy. And that's because God's holiness is the crown of all that he is. Exodus chapter 15, verse 11 asks, who is like you among the gods, O Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders? The answer, of course, is that no being is equal to God in holiness. As the seraphim praised God, the doorpost shook and the heavenly temple was filled with smoke. We see that in verse 4. People wonder and debate over what the smoke represents. I think that the smoke was God's protection of Isaiah, lest he be consumed in another moment by God's infinite holiness. The smoke graciously shielded Isaiah from a view no man or woman can see and live. In verse 5, we read of how Isaiah confessed his sin. The doors of the temple were not the only thing that were shaking. The thing that shook the most in the temple was Isaiah, his body. When he saw the living God, the reigning king of the universe, displayed before his eyes in all of his holiness, Isaiah cried out, woe to me, I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. The full force of Isaiah's confession must be seen against the background of a special form of speech in the Bible. When prophets announce their messages, the most frequent form the divine utterance took was the oracle. The oracle. And the oracles were announcements from God that could be either good news or bad news. The positive oracles were prefaced by the word blessed. And when Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, he used this form of the oracle, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Jesus' audience understood that he was using the formula of the prophet, the oracle that brings good tidings. The prophets also used the negative form of the oracle. On the lips of a prophet, the word woe was an announcement of doom. In the Bible, cities are doomed, nations are doomed, individuals are doomed, all by uttering the oracle of woe. Jesus pronounced the judgment of God upon the Pharisees when he said to them, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Isaiah's use of woe was extraordinary. When he saw the Lord, he pronounced the judgment of God upon himself. Woe to me, he cried, calling down God's judgment upon his own head. Now, why would he do that? Isaiah recognized that he was a man of unclean lips who lived among a people of unclean lips. Lips shape speech, and our speech reveals what lies within our heart. And Isaiah stood as a sinner in the midst of a sinful nation, and he knew that neither he nor the people of Judah could ever stand before this holy God. And sensing his own sinfulness before a holy God, Isaiah believed that he had come to ruin. The instant that he measured himself by the ultimate standard, God's holiness, Isaiah knew he was undone. In verses 6 and 7, we see how Isaiah received God's cleansing. One of the seraphim brought Isaiah the cleansing he needed, a hot coal from the altar. The angel did not get the coal because he felt sorry for Isaiah. No, he went and got the symbol of cleansing because of God's direct command. I doubt there's a whole lot of personal autonomy among the angels around God's throne. And though it's not stated explicitly, I can see God observing Isaiah being so overcome by God's holiness and his own sinfulness that God had compassion on him and instructed the seraph to get the coal and bring it to Isaiah for cleansing. That's a picture of our loving, forgiving, merciful God. Isaiah felt the live coal on his lips, but that wasn't all. He also received the word of forgiveness. The angel said, "Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for." How could God, speaking through the angel, say this to Isaiah? Can God just arbitrarily forgive sin? Can he grant a pardon without full satisfaction of his justice? And the answer, of course, is no. He can't. God cannot subvert his justice any more than he can sin. God cannot magnify mercy at the expense of justice. So what is the solution? Isaiah himself would later give the answer in the beautiful prophecy of Isaiah 53:6, where he writes, "We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." Isaiah prophesied of one who would satisfy God's justice against us by himself bearing the awful punishment we deserve. That's why God could say to Isaiah, "Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for." Because according to God's plan, some 700 years later, his own son, Jesus Christ, would pay for Isaiah's guilt and satisfy his justice. Jesus reconciled God's justice and mercy. And he didn't only do it for Isaiah. He's willing to do that for anyone here today that will put their faith and trust in him. And lastly, in verse 8, we see how Isaiah responded to God's call. Isaiah leaped at the sound of God's call. As God called to his court, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" a cleansed Isaiah stood ready to respond. He had confessed his sin and experienced God's cleansing, and now he was in a position to be able to serve the Lord. And notice that Isaiah responded to God's call even before he knew what task would be given to him. God was looking for a volunteer to enter the lonely, grueling office of prophet to Judah. And if we had time, we would look at the rest of this chapter to see the details of Isaiah's assignment. But here's just a real quick summary for you. Isaiah would speak prophetically to the people of Judah for many years, but they wouldn't listen to him. And God told Isaiah ahead of time that Judah would refuse to heed his voice, and they would continue in their rebellion against him. And even with such a challenging assignment, Isaiah accepted the call because the vision of God had left him a changed man. God had changed him completely and permanently. God took a shattered man and sent him into the ministry. God took a sinful man and made him a prophet. He took a man with an unclean mouth and made him his spokesperson. That's what a vision of God's holiness can do for a person who responds with reverence and awe. Now, you and I may not have a vision of God like Isaiah's, but nonetheless, the lesson is true that when we enter into the presence of God, we must see him as holy. When we see God as holy, our only proper response is to see ourselves as unholy. We ought to be shaken to the roots when we see ourselves against the backdrop of God's holiness. If we are not deeply pained by our sin, we do not understand God's holiness at all. And without such a vision of God's holiness, true worship is not possible. Real worship does not come into God's presence insensitive to his majesty. And my concern is that there is too much shallowness today with regard to God's holiness. Our relationship to God has become too casual. In the modern mind, God has become almost human, so ordinary that we don't understand his holy indignation against sin. And if we rush into his presence with lives unattended by confession and repentance and the cleansing by the Spirit and the Word, we have lost the reverence and awe of our holy God. However, when you have an upward, accurate view of God as high and holy, it leads to an inward, accurate view of yourself as fallen short and desperately needing God's forgiveness, which in turn leads to an outward view of your life being about God's agenda instead of yours, and your life being about the needs of other people instead of you and your own little world. And so I know that our study today of Isaiah chapter 6 has revealed to us our need to recapture the wonder of God. And I want to just give you a few principles this morning to help you think about what that means and what's involved with that. Number one, know this: every created awe is meant to point you to the Creator. Creation is awesome. God designed it to be awesome. And God designed you to take in creation's awesome display. You are meant to be inspired and to celebrate the awesome things that come from the Creator's hand. But as you participate and rejoice in the awesome display of creation, you must understand that these awesome things were never intended to be ultimate. No awesome thing created was meant to give you what only the Creator is able to give. Every awesome thing in creation is designed to point you to the one who alone is worthy of capturing and controlling the awe of your searching and hungry heart. And as it is true of a street sign, so it is true of every wonder-inspiring thing in the universe. The sign is not the thing that you're looking for. No, the sign points to what you're looking for. So you can't stop at the sign, for it will never deliver what the thing it is pointing to will deliver. Created awe has a purpose. It's meant to point you to the one in whom the awe of your heart should rest. If awesome things in creation become your God, the God who created those things will not own your awe. Number two, familiarity is one of the great dangers of the Christian life. Familiarity tends to blind our eyes and dull our senses. What once produced awe in us now barely gets our attention. Speaking of familiarity, Paul David Tripp writes, "It is the worst kind of blindness. It's the physical ability to see without the spiritual ability to really see what you've seen. It's the capacity to look at wonders, things specifically designed to move you and produce in you breathless amazement, and not be moved by them anymore. It's the sad state of yawning in the face of glory. To combat familiarity, we must commit ourselves to be humbly vigilant. We must start every day focusing the eyes of our heart on the stunning glory of God and His life-transforming, amazing grace. We must resist allowing familiarity to replace divine glory with the mundane details of life. Yes, we all face a day-to-day battle for maintaining the awe of God, but we are not alone. God's grace protects us from the dullness and the fickleness of our affections. His grace opens blind eyes and recaptures straying hearts, and we need to learn to depend on and to rely on that grace. Number 3, for the Christian, wonder begins and ends with Jesus. We know this because the entire story of the Bible points to Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. No one else in history inspires awe like He did and like He still does. Jesus walked on water. He restored the sick. He taught us how to love others by demonstrating the most excellent way, voluntary sacrifice for the undeserving. So how do we respond to wonder like this? To the immeasurable love of a kind, gentle, merciful Savior. How do we respond? The only way we can respond, by marveling at the one who did it all. Wondering about the wonder of God is always worthwhile. I don't know about you, but I want to live alive to the wonder of God. And I'm aware that I fall far short. And I need to spend more time gazing upon the beauty of the Lord. I need awe of Him to recapture and refocus and redirect my heart again and again and again. I want to always stand in awe of who God is. And as we've seen today, God is wonderful and beautiful, righteous and mighty, marvelous and holy. Let Him take your breath away and then give your breath back to you to breathe again, transformed by wonder. Let's pray. Father, the sinless seraphim covered their faces in your presence. How much more should we, who are but sinful creatures, bow in reverence before your throne? You alone are holy. You alone are the transcendent, majestic God. You alone are morally pure. You are perfect in light. In you there is no darkness at all. And yet through your Son, Jesus Christ, you came to us as Savior. You came not to pronounce woe, but blessing to those who trust in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Lord, I ask that you would fill our hearts with awe because of your holiness and with amazement because of your love. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, we praise you. Amen.